am here, Melissa Pang with the Entrepreneur Source, and I am here with Jeffrey Polino of the Alternative Board. Hi, Jeffrey. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Melissa, really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. I have to say, I'm excited to have this conversation. So before we jump in, start talking about all things franchising and the Alternative Board and Entrepreneur Source, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into franchising, and how you came to be at the Alternative Board.
Well, okay. Well, starting from the very beginning, I'm a former business owner. I owned a franchise. It was not in tap space, but certainly in the franchising industry. Had some challenges. I bought the business. Things were going great, and then all of a sudden the economy turned, and I had bought a brokerage business. Extremely challenging, to say the least. However, I had the support of my partner and spouse. And what I can say is anyone who's interested in investing in a business, if you happen to be in a relationship, very, very important to make sure that you have those very candid and frank discussions about investing in a business, what it's going to be like to be a business owner, talk a little bit about the highs and lows. And fortunately for me, I married up. She's much smarter than me. So when I told her what I was looking to do, we dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. However, even with that, when the challenges happen, because of my education at university, my experience in working in corporate America, all the training that I received, and the support from my family, we were able to turn it around. So it does have a happy ending. We turned it around after several years of really having a hard time. A lot of sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling at 3 o'clock in the morning, working 12, 14-hour days. But when we turned it around, we were then eventually able to sell the business, and I did very well, thanks to my lovely bride's help. So once that happened, I have to say that I was kind of ruined. I couldn't go back into corporate America again, Melissa, because I had a taste of freedom. And even though it was challenging, and there were moments of, geez, should I have stayed with the job? All that came to an end, and I realized I'm just not cut out for a corporate job anymore. Now, that was me. So then in 2005, I got a phone call from a recruiter, and this recruiter was telling me about a company that was looking for a global business developer. And I'm like, well, who's the company? And they said, the Alternative Board. I'm like, the Alternative what? What do these people do? Well, when the recruiter was explaining it to me, Melissa, being a former business owner and making the transition, I quickly got it. So I'm very grateful that I was able to take the opportunity for the interview. So in 2005, I met with the founder and chairman and the president and CEO. And for me, one of the most important things about investing in a business is, what's the vision of the company? What's the vision of management? Where do you see this business going? Challenge, issues, opportunities, etc. Well, interviewing with the founder and chairman, I got it straight from, the creator, if you will, and the president and CEO was adding to it as to their vision for global expansion. So I'm happy to report that 17 years later, when I started in 2005, we were in the U.S. and Canada, and then rapidly expanded to 24 other countries. So I'd like to think I played a small role in developing TAB into the international brand that it is, working with very, very talented people. And TES has been instrumental in sending us talented candidates who became talented franchisees. So we've built upon those years and years of experience that each franchisee brings to the community. And here we are today in 24 countries and just ready to make it 25 pretty soon, and continues to have an awesome relationship with TES because of the quality of the candidates that TES sends our way.
Love that. I have many questions. There's a lot of different directions we can go in. I do want to just touch on the point that I find interesting where, you came from corporate America, you were a business owner, and then you joined TAB as a business developer, but I'm, as a job, and kind of looking at your own mindset around, okay, didn't even know what the alternative board
Right.
was, didn't want to go back to corporate America, wasn't planning on going back to a job necessarily. But after you, and I'm just drawing a parallel between kind of your journey and the journey of our clients, a lot of times is, you don't know what you don't know. And so you were able to learn more about the alternative board. What even is it? And then it checked off a lot of boxes for you in terms of mission, values, and what the company was doing. It aligned with you, and you made a very educated choice. And I think that's kind of the journey that our clients take as well. So just interesting to hear you say that. And I'm, are you able to then, do you think that that helps you in your conversations with TES clients or candidates in general who are looking at becoming a TAB franchisee?
I really do, Melissa, and here are the reasons for it. Being from corporate America, even with the support of my bride, it's scary to make that switch. But I understood that, and I was not forced into it. Things were going very well for me. I just knew that repetition, same old, I'd rather have a sharp stick in the eye. So when I got to that point where I was making good money, I had benefits, etc., it was just really a process of, do I want to continue to do this, or do I need to make that very scary and difficult decision? But then I realized I'm not starting from scratch. I'm starting from experience. I had decades of training from corporate America, business development experience with them, global business development experience. And they weren't paying me a lot of money because they liked me. They were paying me a lot of money because I performed a very valuable service to the corporation. And quite candidly, I'm saying to myself, I think I'm making them a heck of a lot more money than I'm making. And for me, if I'm going to be separated from my family, I better earn a lot of money, because that's the most precious thing to me. So I made the switch. And when I made the switch, how I knew it was right was the fit, if you will, as to what TAB does, what I enjoyed doing, and kind of like doing what I am. So they first asked me to be a mentor. So I was actually in the field helping our franchisees acquire clients. One of my talents. I enjoyed it. And then what I experienced is that in most cases, when we're working with candidates, some of the candidates that TES will send us, the biggest concern, Melissa, is, how do I get these clients? I'm not really experienced in business development. I'm more operations. I'm more finance. And going into business is scary enough as it is. But then all of a sudden you say, well, wait a minute, how do you get this thing started? How do you get these clients? And quite candidly, it's a process of coaching, which TES does very well with their candidates, of talking them through the process. And what these candidates end up realizing is, I guess I have been doing that in my job. I just never really put that definition to it. So rising up through the ranks, you got to be pretty good at developing business. You've got to be pretty good at networking and having conversations with people. So when you can show them the similarities between what made them successful in, let's say, corporate America, and help them understand that they're not starting from scratch, but you're going to take all of that experience and knowledge and wisdom that they have and transfer it into TAB. Well, when you're working with these privately held business owners, which are just tremendous people, Melissa, first off, they may not have that type of education. They certainly don't have that type of training that corporate America paid for. And they may not have that experience that you do. So they're like sponges, if you will, when you talk to these business owners. But here's the key. The key is, you really have to be a good listener. No one likes someone that comes in and just talks all the time. No one likes anyone to come in and say how smart they are. They want to know, and this is why I think the transition for me was so successful, that you've experienced failure, that you've experienced struggle, and how you manage that, whether you were successful or not. But it's sort of like they want to know that you've kind of experienced or walked in their shoes a little bit, rather than reading in a book somewhere. So those are the types of candidates that we really value from TES, as to those men and women that are extraordinary listeners that can empathize with someone in a tough situation and then respond in kind as to, that happened to me, or something similar happened to me, and here's how I resolved it. Because that's the only way I think you're going to get these member clients to trust you, Melissa.
100%. And again, so much good information there. And I do want to talk about your experience with TES and working with the clients and the coaches. But one thing I also do want to kind of underline what you said was these individuals who are looking at business ownership, maybe for the first time. A lot of TES clients are looking at business ownership for the first time. They're coming from that corporate America job. And I think a lot of times people in general think, okay, I don't have experience in this specific industry. I don't have experience doing exactly this, whether it is tab or whether it's owning a restaurant or,
Right.
running a handyman business,
Yeah.
a painting concept. They're like, I don't know this, or I don't necessarily want to be doing that. But to your point, it's like, no, it's those skills, the transferable skills that you learned and have so much experience in. A lot of these people are 15, 20, 30 years in a corporate job. They've picked up a great deal of skills and abilities that then actually transfer beautifully over to, let's say, tab or something else, even though they never would have thought, wow, I could apply this to a B2B coaching and consulting company. I didn't know I could do that. And so that's what I think. That's why I love franchising. And that's also why I love, kind of what we get to do and what our coaches do is actually introduce people to the idea that they can use all the skills that they've spent years honing and, building on. They can take those and use them in their next kind of, you can call it a career, their next kind of take on life. We call it going from the 1.0 to the
Yes.
2.0. And so that's exactly what you just described. So, again, could talk about that for hours, but I want to just kind of jump over now to your experience with the Entrepreneur Source and working with the coaches, working with clients. What are just maybe some main kind of highlights for you, or things that you have maybe picked up over the years that you enjoy working with? Let's start with the coaches and on that side.
I'd have to say that when you're speaking with a coach, you have to help them understand the model before they can help you identify a candidate. So that type of conversation is, once again, lots of questions to the coach as to, well, what's the coach's background? Did they come from corporate America? How did they find the transition to be? Build that relationship with them, Melissa, as to saying, look, both of us came from, let's say, corporate America, both of us business owners. Tell me a little bit about the challenges that you've experienced in making that decision. How did you make that experience? What were the steps in your process? And when you find out from them, especially the newer coaches, as to their process, you'll find out sometimes, I got to say it, that sometimes people are running to something or people are running from something. Now, it doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there, but you've got to find out, help the coach, and then the coach can help the candidate understand, are you running to or running from? Process may be similar, but the conversations and the questions will be different, because there'll be that kind of concern. So working with coaches, especially the experienced coaches with TES, I mean, there's that click going on. So you do the Vulcan mind melt with the experienced ones, and you spend time with the newer coaches because they will be the new sheriffs in town. Just give them a little time, give them a little coaching, give them a little understanding that, yeah, I know what it's like to be in privately held business. I was once franchisee, challenges and issues, because, again, Melissa, if we're going to be candid and have a conversation, an adult conversation, it's not easy what your consultants do. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of denial. There's a lot of ghosting, and that goes along with what we do. But the reward is when you find those candidates that really, really want to help. I see your coaches light up. I mean, they are just beaming that they were able to help someone make that transition. So from my experience with TES, it's your experienced coaches, read what they send you. Here's an idea, people. The RFE that they spent time on, it's like an open book test. You just read it, and all of a sudden, when you talk to the candidates, it's like, man, this conversation is going really well. Or don't read it and waste all of that valuable information and blow the shot. With the newer consultants, help them understand what you look for in the RFE, what's helpful to you in conversations with their candidates to help them be more successful. So to me, it's not very challenging when you build a relationship with a TES coach. The experienced ones, you better read their information because they take no prisoners. And the ones that are just learning, help them understand the information that's helpful in these RFEs. Follow up with both of them, experienced, new. Follow up quickly with them. Give them the feedback as to exactly what happened in the conversation, where you may have concerns. Because if you don't have that type of relationship, it's really going to be a struggle. Now, one other thing, I know that their mission is basically to present other brands. Sometimes franchisors have a hard time with this. I look at it as there's only two ways to have the tallest building in town. Build your own or tear somebody else's down. I would never receive another referral from TES if I tore somebody else's down. Use what you got, present what you got. If you've done a good job and there's a fit, sweet spot for both you and the candidate, most likely you'll have a new franchisees. If not, make sure that if they get back to the TES coach, that they say to them, Tad really wasn't for me, but I'm so grateful that you introduced that brand to me. Yeah. Rather than, did you fall and hit your head? Why did you send me to that guy? So those are a couple of things, Melissa, that really are top of mind for me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those things. And again, I go back to, and I talk about it all the time. People are probably tired of hearing me say it, but it's collaboration. But I love that you put kind of painted a picture of what collaboration can look like and should look like on a very simple level. But really, it's that back and forth. And again, not just you as the franchisor, doing all the follow up and getting back to them and all this stuff. It's also on the other side, where the coaches also have this great rapport. They've gathered a lot of great information that also as a franchisor, you can leverage and should leverage, So again, to your point, taking time to read the information and understand the details that maybe some of the more tenured coaches are going to send. And with the newer coaches, yes, getting in with them and talking about, these are the people that do well. These are our franchisees and starting to build the relationship. Because I think sometimes people will say on both sides, coach, franchisor, they'll say, listen, I don't have time. I'm too busy working with too many candidates, or I'm working with so many clients. I just don't have time for the relationship between franchisor and coach. And it's like, that's actually overlooking a big piece of it, because without that collaboration, it doesn't matter how many clients you're working with. It doesn't matter how many candidates you're working with. It's going to be really hard to bring everything together without the collaboration.
Great,
so
Melissa,
again, I thought
what a great really point. And, you bring up the topic of it's not how I want to communicate. It's how the consultant or the coach wants to communicate. I have on the DISC profile, I'm what is known as a very high D. So I sometimes can communicate rapid fire, short sentences. So when I'm talking to a coach or a consultant who's a fellow ID, we do the Vulcan mind melt. When someone happens to be more of the S or C, more compliant, more steady, calmer, the conversation has to be, you have to communicate in their language, not your preferred language. So depending on the coach will also determine the length of conversation, the amount of information in the conversation, because some of your coaches, consultants are probably going to be like me. You don't have to say a lot. Like what's the highlight? What's the bullet point? Lead with the headline, and then we don't have to talk about the rest. But some coaches are a little bit more detailed, just like our franchisees, and they're probably going to attract those types of franchisees or those types of candidates. So when one of your coaches sends us a candidate, and I understand that coach is more steady, consistent, less talkative, pretty sure that's going to be a candidate that's probably they're going to refer. So if I don't understand how to speak their language, I'm not going to have success with them. And there is no correlation with regard to DISC, who's successful and who's not. So I only use that in order to be able to effectively communicate with them. So I think you brought up a great point, because it's not how I want to communicate. It's how the consultant or the coach wants to communicate. It's my job to make them comfortable in presenting candidates to us. It's my job to communicate with them. Mm-hmm. And if by chance, again, this is a very real and genuine conversation, if the consultant is busy, so busy they got a lot of candidates in the pipeline and they're not sending you feedback, please understand when I say this, too bad. Continue to send them the feedback, continue to keep them in the loop, and understand that they may have a lot of candidates right now that they're looking to help. Your job is to provide them with that information, that feedback, so when they do talk to that candidate, you've got them up to speed. I think too many times people are worried about, well, they didn't reply to my email. Too bad. Continue to send them the information. I tell you that they always read it. They'll always pay attention. But, try not to make it all about you. Try to make it about the candidate and the coach and the consultant. That's my thinking.
I like that. And just in general, too, I feel like that's great advice in terms of whether you're working with a coach or a coach working with a client or a franchisor working with the client or me working with the people that I work with. It's you want to meet people right where they're at. And just in general, being able to, whether that's meet them where they're at in communication style. So you mentioned DISC, that's a communication assessment tool, or maybe someone's just having a bad day or there's some kind of stressor happening. I hear lots of stories too where the coach is like, Melissa, you'll never believe it, but I had my client, he was really excited about a certain brand, he was getting ready to go for it, and then all of a sudden his wife served him divorce papers, and now he's just literally just out in, he has no idea what just hit him, or that's like a very aggressive example, but that has happened, or all of a sudden there's a family emergency or things come up, like where right you're talking with people, you're not just talking with a checklist, or you're not just talking with a person that you can just move XYZ through the process, linear, right. Nothing's going to change. You treat everyone the same, and it doesn't work like that in life in general, but especially when it comes to, working with coaches or working with clients, that's a big part to understand. Meet people where they're at in that moment on that day.
So, I couldn't agree more. So if you have an opportunity, if my camera would do that, I would show you that there's always a mirror right over my computer. Why? Old school, but it's like if you're not looking good, smiling, positive, do not pick up the phone. Reschedule the call, do whatever you got to do. But sometimes they have to borrow your passion and your energy. And when you talk about, a bad day or, folks, not responding the way you want, there again, it gets into the coaching as to, it just sounds like, or it feels like that today might not be the best day to have this conversation. Anything I can help with. 8 times out of 10, well, here's what happened. My mother just got rushed to the hospital. My son is not feeling well, whatever it happens to be. So you're right. You have to really watch for the indicators and not blow the shot, not assume because someone who didn't make the call didn't want to have the call. Life happens. A lot of people have a lot of life going on. And you're so right, Melissa. So then you communicate back to the coach, not typing it in as to they didn't show up and they blew me off. I'm concerned. Frederick wasn't on the call. Do you know anything about Frederick? Is he okay? because usually something happened. Now, if someone is not really ready, and it does happen, work with them as much as you can and understand that the coach, their mission is to send as many people your way as possible. So if you need to have a conversation with the coach because they're sending someone over that's perhaps not quite qualified, don't get upset. Don't be disappointed. Don't get angry. Coach them. Help them understand why it might not be a fit. And if you have one of those conversations that are not going well with the candidate, once again, talk to the coach. Tell them. I spoke to them, and quite candidly, their spouse, their significant other is not on board. So bad news doesn't get better with time. So it usually doesn't end up well when it's like that. However, the coach might not be aware of it. So share the information. Then both of you are talking to the candidate, and that's the case. Then the coach may understand, and you may understand that maybe time is not right, or it's just not going to happen because they're just digging in. But you didn't ruin the relationship because you failed to ask the question, or you failed to be understanding. You failed to be empathetic as to people got a lot of life going on. And you'll rob yourself of future opportunities. That's what I think.
Great insights on that as well. And again, just great, kind of real life examples as to what it could look like and how to handle certain things. So thank you. And so we have a little bit of time left. So I want to move now. We talked a lot about great discussion around the coach piece of it, what that looks like. I'd like to ask you if you have any specific story of a client that kind of sticks out to you, a TES client, and kind of talking through what it was like working with the TES client and what drew them to TAB, like what was exciting for them about TAB, and if you saw any kind of mindset shift similar to your own experience of corporate America to business owner and then looking at TAB in the way that you did. Have you seen that with a specific client, a story that you'd want to share?
The most recent one, Melissa, was a candidate that sent our way that he, when someone feels as though makes you feel as though they're extremely suspicious by how they ask questions. It's not necessarily the question, but it might be the tone of the question. It might be multiple questions like, I gotcha, or there's something behind this, you're something perhaps you're not telling me. So when we had conversations with this particular candidate at first, and I'm sure the coach probably experienced the same thing, that they were very skeptical and sometimes a little cynical and downright paranoid because they really wanted to make the move. But they were, I'll say, fearful that they didn't know what they didn't know, and they wanted to come across as, analytical, whatever it was, but it was just like firing questions. And the response, and at least in terms of how we've been trained and the coach has been trained, is answer those questions the best you can, but try not to answer it in the same tone because it just escalates. And lo and behold, I'm not quite sure what happened, but after a while, and of course, after communicating with the coach as to, look, we're not the enemy here. The choice is always going to be the candidates. They can do it or not do it. Our job is to provide them information. Your job is also provide them information, help them through the process. We'd welcome them into the community. However, before they come in, they really have to have a mind shift as to imagine them doing that to a potential client, where it was like, it's not a conversation, it was an interrogation. So I don't know if it was the coach and us, a combination, but then all of a sudden it was like a switch thrown. And then we had a conversation with this candidate, and they were very relaxed. very, very much contributing to conversation. We weren't getting that quick fire question. And I think it may have a lot to do with when we allowed them, when they were ready, for validation calls. That seemed to have like calmed the situation down, where they were talking to people that they knew their only vested interest, Melissa, is they needed someone else who was just as talented to help us build a brand. That was the only thing that they were interested in. Quite candidly, they weren't looking at, well, geez, I hope I can help Jeffrey sell a franchise. It was nothing like that. They want to know, was this person qualified? Would they represent the brand? Would they continue to add value to the business that they invested in? So that must also be in the turning point. But that was a perfect example of how we took someone, along with the coach, from cynical, skeptical, maybe even downright paranoid, worked with them through the process, didn't get defensive, stuck with them because we knew there was something there. And then all of a sudden they had such a paradigm shift in their thinking. They're one of our best new franchisees. Go figure.
Wow. I love this story because, first of all, just kudos to you and your team. Kudos to the coach on sticking with it. Because I think a lot of times you can disqualify someone out early on because of maybe their personality. I know sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's different things. Or you're just thinking, why am I wasting my time with this person? They're not even showing the interest. They're not excited
Right.
about this. They're asking so many questions. But the fact that you guys were like, you know what, we see something here, which, kudos to you guys again for looking beyond just the, here and now, that day, that time, how those people are presenting and going through that. You kind of like wore them down so that they really saw the value and they were like, hang on. And there was something that they saw about you guys too. It must have been, because otherwise they would not have stuck with it for that long.
This was one of your experienced coaches, so they knew what they were doing, and their RFV was one of the keys that kept us focused in terms of saying there's something there, and if we can allow this person to be a little bit more open, trust a little bit more, and help them understand that doesn't relinquish control. They're still in control of making the decision, whether it be yes, our favorite answer, or no, our second favorite answer. Everything's going to be okay. But in order for them to be successful here, they cannot have that approach when they're looking for member clients. It just doesn't work. No one wants to be interrogated. Yeah. So I think the combination of the RFE, the experience of the coach, our ability to have those types of conversations without being defensive, allow them to get into validation where they knew the franchisees had no hidden agenda. We ended up taking them in. And again, for a new franchisee, they're on an accelerated path of being very well. So it's one of those examples, I guess, of just have a little patience sometimes with people.
Absolutely. I think that's good. Again, in someone else who's in kind of your role, your position of bringing in new franchisees, and for coaches who are working with clients, there's so many different personalities. And then just in general, if you are in a role or position where you have to work with other people, just to remember that and give people the benefit of the doubt. We say too, 95% of our clients who end up going into a business, they end up going into one that they never would have looked at, or they would have prematurely dismissed without the help of a coach. And you can also say without the help of the franchise brand as well, because you're giving education. You're letting someone make their informed choice. And we also say you have to be detached from the outcome, which a lot of times, let's say you're attached to, the outcome that I want is for that person to, move forward with the franchise. That's not the outcome. It's really, can we give this person education? Can we let them explore what this opportunity is? And then the outcome is really that they make an informed choice one way or another. That's what we're looking for. And more often than not, it actually does end up that they move forward with the franchise, and to your point, become a fabulous top performing
Melissa, I think I'm going to have you make my next candidate call, because when you said detach from the outcome, I'm like, I should have said that. That was great because that's the case in terms of, rather than selling, our job is to solve and serve. Rather than closing, our job is to coach.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we want, let's say, our favorite answer, our second favorite answer is okay too, because we're detached from the outcome. It's not like we're going to do everything we can to, quote, close this person. Look, we've been doing this for several decades, and I think we've been having a relationship with TES for several decades. That relationship would have never flourished if we were that way. It just wouldn't. You wouldn't send us candidates. So when they talk with us, I hope that they always feel there's no pressure, but there's information, there's collaboration, there's cooperation, regardless of whether it's our favorite answer or our second favorite answer. So you're so right. We try to emulate the coach as to it's the candidate's decision. And if the candidate makes the decision, it's got to be the right decision for them.
100%. And I think that's why we have had such a long, successful relationship, Jeffrey, with the TES and the alternative board, because that does go a long way. And it's funny because I think a lot of times people look at certain outcomes and think that's the most important thing. But when you take the approach that you've described during these past, our past conversation, that is the most important thing, and the rest will follow. In everything kind of falls into place, but it does take some time and effort and commitment on all parties' sides. But I think when everyone has, especially the client's best interest at heart, then again,
it's easy to say, so hard to do when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the thick of it, because you've invested hours, calls. So it's difficult for the coaches. It's difficult for us. But you're right. If we always keep in mind that it's for the benefit of the client, the benefit for the candidate, and for us, Melissa, if they choose another system, they may become a member someday because they're a privately held business owner now. And I said this at one of the sessions, one of the breakout groups, if by chance they should decide that TES is the best fit for you, stings a little bit, but then the sting is taken out because now they know all about the alternative board. They really, really liked us. We may have come in second, but we may be first now with the candidates that they have in terms of presenting brands. So we're trying to look at it as from either way, it's a win for us, a win for the candidate, and hopefully a win for the coach as well.
Absolutely. That's how we like to do things. So thank you so much, Jeffrey, for taking some time with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as I knew I would, but you brought up a lot of really great points on a lot of different topics that I think actually can be broadly applied to a lot of different things and just relationships in general, relationships with clients, customers, candidates, and coworkers, teammates, partners, all the above. So thank you so much for taking some time.
The last thing I have to say is every single time I see you at conference, and I'm looking forward to seeing you this year in Georgia, you've always demonstrated patience. I know that, the building's on fire. You got thousands of things to do. And yet when I come up and ask this kind of silly question, you never make me feel silly. You always stop, you always focus and say, well, here's what I would do. Here's the situation. And then as soon as that's done, I see you go right back into action again. So you absolutely practice the culture and the values of TES, especially when you're working with the Azores. So I just want to say thank you very much for that, because I never felt like I was interrupting or disturbing you. You were always very focused on what I had to say and the challenges that I had at the time. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. It's my pleasure. I love working with you guys. I love working with you. So looking forward to many more years.
See you in Savannah.
TES. Thank you.